R.I.P. We about to get busy. I'm gonna set it off like this. 1 2 1 2. You know what I'm saying? You got Jeru The Damaja in the house. I'm about to flip a freestyle, and I'm gonna do it like this. Check it out, check it out. I'm the mic controller, like solar. I heat up any MC in the polar universe, cause they are all colder than me. You know, I'm the deadliest MC on the planet, and just like Janet Jackson, I'm worldwide. MCs running hard, because when the Damaja attacks, MCs stop rhyming and they start smoking crack or slinging jacks or doing carjacks. But all of that, still their rhymes are whack. This is a freestyle, so I won't get too buck wild. I'm just rocking it, cause they asked me to do it. So you know that I'll flip it, because I rip it. And any other subject, we can skip it. But I don't know what else to say, so I'm out. But that was just a freestyle, no doubt. Peace. Dude, all I'm doing is calling out what they do. I'm saying, watch what he do and master yourself. That's what you're supposed to do.
Okay.
Kendrick Jeru Davis, aka Jeru The Damaja, born February 14th, 1972. When talking hip-hop, many times the conversation eventually gets to what was the best era to enjoy rap music. Some say the early 2000s, some say the early or late 90s, and some even say hip-hop has never been better than it is now. For the most part, if you've somehow been able to enjoy all eras, from being there or doing your homework, the majority rules that in its purest form, the 90s was the golden era where competition was at its peak. Artists all tried to bring their own flavor to the pot, unlike today where it all pretty much sounds the same, except for a few cruising in their own lane, which is why they find success and longevity. From there, it goes to, well, what year in the 90s? 1994 raises its hands because it has a lot to say about why that year stands out among all. Fugees' first album, Gang Starr, Nas's debut and top 3 album of all time, Illmatic, the debut of Outkast, Biggie, Bone Thugs, Method Man, and more. All came out that year, many that release being the first time history would record studio albums from these future all-time great MCs. Another album that released that year was the debut of one of hip-hop's greatest storytellers ever, Jeru The Damaja, and his album The Sun Rises in the East. It's also regarded as a top 100 album of all time. For Jeru to release in a juggernaut of an era, and the power punch 94 was for that decade, and his album still to be placed among the best, is high marks for the Brooklyn bred MC. But other than research to find out how good Jeru was, he and his album is almost never mentioned on mainstream platforms for its content. For starters, the entire album was produced by the legend DJ Premier in his prime, at the same time he was sharing beats with Nas for the classic Illmatic. Shared studio time and 16s with the late legend Guru, and has been named as inspiration for one of the greatest rappers ever, Biggie Smalls, inspiring his flow and conception on one of hip-hop's greatest songs ever, Kick in the Door, that was partly a subliminal diss response to Jeru in a misunderstanding that Jeru's One Day song was a shot at Biggie. Jeru has been around, and Jeru was one of the best to do it when hip-hop was at its most competitive. He didn't try to woo you with lines of being the biggest drug dealer or stick-up kid or shooter feared in the streets. He used his skill, lyrics, and infinite potential to slide across beats like Come Clean and The Original. On One Day, he tells one of the dopest stories about hip-hop being hijacked and his attempt to get it back, where he used his unique and advanced storytelling ability right out the gate, done like few others ever could. Yet, when you hear tales of the best not just storytellers but rappers of his generation, Jeru The Damaja is seldom mentioned. Why is that? Let's talk about it. It's your boy JC, Stunted Growth Music. Let's cut it, man. Take a minute to like, subscribe, and comment on who I should do next. Jeru is a rapper and producer from Brooklyn, New York that came up around many hip-hop legends like Old Dirty Bastard, GZA, RZA, Biggie Smalls, and more. He came in under the tutelage of Gang Starr's Guru, Big Suge, and later DJ Premier after Suge was locked up. His first major look was featuring on Gang Starr's I'm the Man track in 1992 that made him really see that he had a chance being a solo artist in hip-hop. He stayed in the studio, even learning tips here and there from Premier about producing, leading to his debut single Come Clean that came to pass at a Gang Starr sound check, imitating Guru and hearing Premier scratch Onyx, later using that as his hook. It was the first song off his classic album he and DJ Premier worked on that set the tone for the album and Jeru's career. Stunt number 1, Getting Shine in a Bright Era. Like mentioned, the 90s was one of the greatest eras in hip-hop and competition was tough. There were many great artists eager to release their debut albums and let the world know about what they had in store. For an artist, your first album means the world and sets the tone for how your career will most likely play out. For Jeru, the environment and circumstances around his debut coming out was exactly how his career would wind up going. His album would release May 24th in the golden year of 1994, almost a month after Illmatic dropped, which, when it did, was really all hip-hop was focused on. Even the 20-year anniversary of the album completely dwarfs Jeru's release and was the first time he would experience being outshined by a sun that would never go out. Later in the year, Biggie dropped his debut and took over as King of Brooklyn. New York was in a frenzy. Method Man's Takao came to close out the year of numerous classics that received instant praise on a mainstream level, unlike Jeru's quiet classic debut that would eventually get better over time. It peaked 36 on the Billboard 200, had only Come Clean enter the top 100 charts at 88, and wasn't marketed to sell like the other major albums that year. It did happen to stamp Jeru as one of the best on the scene to his peers and mainly underground hip-hop fans. His poetry on rap beats flow, raw New York texture, knowledge, and substance were well appreciated, but didn't receive the shine like other artists that year and the era around 94 in general. Stunt number 2, Hip-Hop Got Dressed. In the 90s, what also made hip-hop as interesting as it was is how many changes it went through as we as fans got to see all these experiments play out in real time. One change was hip-hop dressing itself up in nice suits, Versace linens, and rhymes about being the flyest and most jiggy, as they say. Bad Boy Records at the forefront and eventually in the target scope of Jeru. Interestingly, this growth stunt is what inspired Biggie's song Kickin' the Door. Puff and Bad Boy Records were at the head of cleaning rap up, if you will, from the grimy, big coat, scruffy hair and face, Timberland boot wearing early 90s to pleated pants, penny loafers, and suits the mid to late 90s would be infected by. Jeru noticed this change happening firsthand when he, Method Man, and DJ Premier weren't allowed entry into Biggie's album release party at the Palladium because they weren't dressed in suits like everyone else. The doorman saying, quote, they weren't dressed right. Jeru was pissed because DJ Premier was on Biggie's album, so was Method Man, and he was Jeru The Damaja. How are we not to be let in? An argument began and eventually Puff sent security to the front who let them in through the back door as they were. Jeru said to himself, man, niggas is fucking up hip-hop, making it all jiggy and shit. Being young, he went back to the studio with that on his mind and made the song One Day, a shot at Bad Boy and hip-hop for becoming something he didn't feel was necessary. This, of course, led to Biggie's Kickin' the Door in response. That record actually produced and recorded by DJ Premier. In hindsight, hip-hop didn't need to just get dressed, it simply had to go through another change. As it got flashier and more about the artist's appearance and how marketable they can be, artists like Jeru, who were skill-based artists not encouraged by making themselves more marketable, fell through the cracks and was kinda left behind. Stunt number 3, the death of conscious rap. In tandem with rap becoming more mainstream and radio-friendly, jiggy as young Jeru would call it, there was also the death of thinker rap music and the emergence once again of the super gangster like 50 Cent, the big pimpin' rappers, or the South snapping and getting crunk. In the 2000s, hip-hop was fully jiggy. If Jeru didn't like what Puff was doing in the 90s, he sure hated what the landscape looked like to him in the early 2000s. By then, conscious rappers were a rarity. Even though there's always been a few new artists of the same 90s boom bap ilk, predominantly the game became who can sell the most records and what interesting tactic can you introduce to the fans to make your record sell more. Beef, flossing, major label machines, a dance move, an R&B feature. In this time, Jeru must have felt like a fish out of water. He released 2 albums in the 2000s and they both fell virtually on deaf ears mainstream-wise in favor of hit songs, ringtones, and flash. His poetic style was now called old school and deemed prehistoric. Jeru, unable to convert, had to accept the change. All in all, none of that hurts the fact Jeru is one of the dopest hip-hop artists of all time. His storytelling abilities, cadence, and delivery, also originality and catalog, are stamped in hip-hop history. No, he wasn't a top-selling artist, but skill-wise, rap peers and fans understand what Jeru meant to hip-hop. But for these reasons, when they talk about hip-hop legends, Jeru's name is not usually mentioned. Salute, much respect. It's your boy JC Stunted Growth Music, and I'm out.